Hey, what is up, everybody? Welcome into the show. Yet another episode of Crushing Fantasy Football. I am Bryce Lockridge, your host of the show. Guys, today, if you haven't noticed, the lighting is a little bit off, right? I moved into a new apartment. So, I'm working on getting my studio set up and getting the lighting situation a little bit better. But for the sake of today's video, I'm going to be talking about 5 players that I want you guys to avoid. Now, these are guys that are going to maybe tilt some people because they don't want to be told that these guys are going to bust because, well, they're going high in drafts. I'm not here to tell you guys about avoid Olamide Zaccheaus because, he's going undrafted in most drafts. I'm not here to make a video like that. I'm talking about guys that people have high hopes for in fantasy that are going high in fantasy drafts. Because here's the deal. Every single year in fantasy, 35 to 40% of the players with round, top 4 draft capital as far as rounds 1, 2, 3, and 4, they end up busting. 40% of the players that go in round 1 typically bust. Okay, so I'm going to be talking about players that have high draft capital and people have high hopes for in fantasy that I think you should avoid, and I'm going to explain why. So I'm going to talk right here about my first player on my list, and that's Jonathan Taylor. Now, obviously, this is a guy who finished last year as the RB1 in multiple fantasy formats. So a lot of people are high on him. They're going to draft him in round 1, the middle of round 1. Some people might even draft him early in round 1. But I'm telling you guys, this is a year to avoid Jonathan Taylor. If you look at the last season, 2021, where he absolutely lit the league on fire, the dude absolutely flopped the next year and was the running back 17. This typically happens with running backs coming off pinnacle seasons. They almost always flop the next year. We saw it last year with Saquon. We've seen this over the last 20 years in fantasy. Players that finish as the running back 1 typically fall off the season after. Now, that's not my only reasoning. If that was my only reason, that wouldn't be a good enough reason to avoid him. There are others. Look, Daniel Jones is coming off of a major injury. A big reason why Jonathan Taylor's yards per carry efficiency was so good last year is because he had a mobile quarterback that always increases yards per carry efficiency for running backs. And now Jonathan Taylor is going to be playing with a less mobile Daniel Jones. I don't care what anybody says. Daniel Jones is not going to have the same mobility that he had last year. There's also the departure of Michael Pittman Jr. This offense, I don't want to say was dependent on Michael Pittman Jr., but was a lot better with Michael Pittman Jr. Now, they don't really have a true wide receiver 1. Alec Pierce, he's banged up right now. I don't really consider him a true wide receiver 1. He's more of a deep ball merchant that happened to have a good season last year. I think he's going to be a massive bust, but I'll talk about that in another video. And look, I think the Colts offense is going to underperform massively. I don't think this offense is going to be nearly as good as people think it is. And, if you look at Jonathan Taylor, he's over the 1,500 career carry mark. That's typically when we see running backs start to fall off. So due to the workload that he saw last year, due to his overall career workload, due to the fact that I don't think the offense is going to be as good this year or not even close to as good as it was last year, I say we avoid Jonathan Taylor. Next player on my list that I want you to avoid is going to be Zay Flowers. Now, if you look at Zay Flowers last year, he wasn't even in the top 25 in red zone target share. This dude doesn't get targeted heavily in the red zone. He wasn't even top 5 in overall target share. He wasn't top 10 in overall target share, right? He actually has not had a single season in fantasy where he's been top 10 in the league at target share. The dude does not get targeted enough. Why? He plays for the Ravens. The Ravens don't ever hyper-target a wide receiver 1, so he doesn't get hyper-targeted wide receiver 1 overall target share. He doesn't have true wide receiver 1 talent. He's a good receiver, but he's not a true wide receiver 1 from a talent perspective. His big play ability is slightly limited in the fact that he's just not an incredible deep ball pass catcher. He'll mix those in the season, but he's not a great deep ball pass catcher. Doesn't get targeted heavily within the red zone. And Lamar Jackson is just not known for producing true wide receiver 1s. I think he's going way too high in drafts. Next player on my list is going to be Breece Hall. Now, if you look at Breece Hall, he's been a bust 3 seasons in a row. I mean, he had that great season his first year, but if you look at the yards per carry efficiency throughout his career, this dude has never averaged more than 4.5 yards a carry in a season outside of his first season in fantasy where he averaged 5.8 yards a carry and went absolutely nuclear from a fantasy points per game perspective. The dude hasn't been an elite running back from a yards per carry efficiency standpoint since then, and he really has declined in the passing game in the last few seasons. So I don't know. The only case that can be made for a Breece Hall bounce back is the fact that he has a less mobile quarterback, and Geno Smith might get him involved more in the passing game because of this dump-offs out of the backfield. But the detriment to this is that yards per carry efficiency with running backs typically go down when they have less mobile quarterbacks. Geno Smith at this point in his career is not a mobile quarterback whatsoever. He's even leaning towards being, bottom 10 in the league as far as overall mobility, rushing upside for a quarterback. So I really don't like this offense. The Jets offense is projected to be a bottom 5 offense in the NFL. There's maybe a slight chance that they outperform expectations due to the fact that they have a true wide receiver one in Garrett Wilson. They drafted what's supposed to be a good pass catching tight end in Kenyon Sadiq. So could the offense outperform expectations a little bit? Sure. But I don't think there's any chance that they won't be bottom 10 in the league as an overall offensive unit. So I'm going to be avoiding Breece Hall. Next player on my list is going to be Jaylen Waddle. Now, Jaylen Waddle every single season is one of the most overdrafted players in fantasy, and I'll never understand why. This dude has speed. He has talent. I get it. He's flashy. He's fun to watch. And he had a great sophomore season of over 1,300 receiving yards in his second year when he went off with Tua. But he's had 5 seasons in the NFL. And on a 5-season sample size, this dude has not been good. He's had 1 good season. 4 out of the 5 seasons, he's been absolutely terrible. And the argument can be made that, okay, he's going into what's supposed to be a good offense in Denver, and, he's going to be the wide receiver one of the offense. This is probably true. I think he'll be the wide receiver one over Courtland Sutton. I think he'll out-target Courtland Sutton and everything like that. But as an undersized receiver, this dude never has had a good red zone target share in his career. When teams get into the red zone, they don't target him as much due to being undersized. This typically happens with wide receivers under 5'10". Obviously, there's exceptions, but there's not many. So considering the fact that the red zone target share is not there for Jaylen Waddle, I think that the fact that he's in a good offense, I still don't think the touchdown upside is going to be that high for him. I don't see him scoring double-digit touchdowns this year. I don't see him averaging more than 9 targets a game. I don't see him with over 1,200 receiving yards. The only thing that he could possibly do in this offense that is good is finish with 12 or 1,300 receiving yards at the most and a limited amount of touchdowns. So I'm avoiding Jaylen Waddle. Next and final player that I'm going to have here on my list is going to be Christian Watson. Now, Christian Watson, the dude just never stays on the field. He never stays on the field. You look at his entire career, he's never played more than 15 games. Most seasons, he doesn't even get on the field for 12 games. The dude just quite literally never stays on the field, right? He's playing in an offense that should be good, but it's still a somewhat loaded pass catcher room. I mean, Tucker Kraft is going to be targeted like crazy. Obviously there's some vacated targets with Dobbs leaving and everything like that. But look, Jayden Reed's still going to be targeted like crazy. I would not be surprised if Jayden Reed was still the wide receiver one in this offense over Christian Watson. Christian Watson's going above him. The draft capital is just way too high. I'm not banging in on the Packers offense to be as good as people think it is. And even so, Christian Watson doesn't get targeted heavily enough within the red zone for being as big as he is. Most guys that are above the height of 6'4" get targeted in the red zone pretty often. But last year, the dude wasn't even top 25 in red zone target share. So I don't see a whole lot of touchdown upside for Christian Watson. And I don't see him staying on the field. So I'm going to be avoiding him. All right, guys, these are 5 players to avoid. Obviously, these are guys that are going high in drafts. I wasn't here to tell you about players that were going low in drafts that were obvious avoids. These are players that people are drafting way too high. And I think they could be a serious detriment to your fantasy team if you draft them. And they're going to be wasted picks, so don't draft them. All right, I appreciate you guys. Catch you later.